sometimes there are certain mudras that are also spiritual in nature, where you can also invoke a certain Ishta Devata. One can do some visualization. You can do japa at the same time. And these are things that are a little difficult to do when your stomach is full. So ideally, at least 2 hours after a meal or first thing in the morning, if possible. If not, it can be done at any time. Now, mudras can be done in any position. It can be seated or lying down in bed. Many people who are unable to get out of bed can use the mudras. One condition that I have learned from my teachers is that you don't place the bare soles of your feet on the ground. You have to place a mat, or if your feet are folded, it's okay. Or if you're lying in bed, it's okay. But ideally, something has to be there. You have a mat or a little stool or a chowki or something, so that the feet are not directly touching the floor. Another thing with many mudras is that initially, especially when someone has certain issues, initially placing those mudras might be a little painful, because there are certain blocks in the system. That is the reason why a specific mudra is suggested. But in keeping the mudra, you might experience some pain, which means that you start with what you can. Because for some people, it's very difficult to manage 20 minutes. So we reduce the time you can do it. Start with 5 minutes, slowly build it up. And also, I have seen, even with my mother, for instance, certain mudras, the hands will not come into position. And so there might be a necessity to hold it in place initially, because there is that kind of a block in the circulation that has to be corrected, but it will take time. You can't force it, but gradually one can ease into it. Now, this is the general preamble about mudra. This is an introductory talk. What I have chosen for today are a cross-section of 4 mudras, because there are mudras not just for ailments, but the use of the mudra can be applied to physical and physiological needs. They can be applied to our emotional needs as well, and for spiritual purposes. So there's a broad spectrum that we can look at from the outer to the inner. And so today I'm going to focus on just 4 of them. The first is the prana mudra, because this is essential, because what we need today is prana. Because our sources of prana are polluted. Our earth is polluted. The waters are polluted. The air is polluted. Literally, there is so much. The Panchabhuta are not the Panchabhuta of the Vedic times or later, which means our source of prana itself is heavily contaminated. And so we need this prana. One reason for lack of immunity is lack of pranic flow. And there is this idea also that in general, all of us have prana, and we hold the prana around us. So to a distance of 12 finger spans, we said 12 angulas, the prana flows around us for anyone. But when we are excited, when we are agitated, when we are stressed, or even when we do things that are very high intensity in terms of energy, we will dissipate the prana. The prana will go out of the body, and then you will feel depleted. This happens with illness. It happens with very heavy activity. This is why that sudden fatigue comes in, which means there have to be practices that draw the prana back to our core. We need to hold it. The yogis are the ones who are able to contain the prana within their body. The prana doesn't leave. They hold it within their body through various techniques of pranayama and so on. One such mudra is the prana mudra. The prana mudra focuses on the pancha prana. You have the prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana. These are the pancha prana. The chief of them is prana, responsible for our respiration, our vitality. Apana is situated in the region below the navel, and the apana is associated with elimination, excretory processes. The apana is also a major component in the reproductive process. Vyana is responsible for circulation throughout the body, the necessary flow of nutrients, of blood, of everything. Vyana is like a messenger, flows throughout. Udana is situated in the region of the throat. It is associated with both communication. It is also that vayu that is essential to keep the Atma inside us. It is tied to our karma. And so for as long as our prarabdha karma is there, the udana will be holding the prana in. But once the karma finishes, means the person has finished the end of that lifetime, the udana will activate and leave the atma outside. Then you have the samana, which is in the navel. It functions as our digestive fire. We call it the Vaishvanaragni or the Jatharagni inside of us. Right? So the prana mudra is a way of regulating the function of the pancha prana. Because unless the pancha prana function properly, we cannot have good health. Now, what is the prana mudra? It's one of the simplest mudras. It's this way. You have to bend the I'll show you here. You bend the thumb and you place the thumb in contact with the ring finger and the little finger that are held together. Right? This is the prana mudra. This way. Right? Little finger and ring finger have to be placed together. Sir, the index finger and the middle finger are left out. Actually, you have to do it the other way. Okay. இல்ல இந்த கையில மாறி இருக்கு உங்க லெஃப்ட் ஹேண்ட்ல மாறி இருக்கு அந்த வேற so anyway this is the mudra ipo how do you keep the mudra it's difficult to hold it up like this you can keep it on your lap itself generally kept on the lap to the extent possible hands are kept open in general mudras when you do mudras don't turn them down. Because when you're open, you're also receiving the energy that is flowing through the mudra. You have to remember that they are potent channels by which we are receiving the energy of the cosmos and diverting that energy into the system. So you don't turn it down or you don't let it just rest like this. We keep them open. You can keep them on your lap. You can keep them by the sides of your body if you are lying down. Right? Now, in this, you can do other things. See, one thing with mudras is that people often ask, see, with things like yoga, you can't do anything else. You have to be doing your asana or pranayama. You can't watch television. You can't listen to music. You can't do whatever you feel like. With mudras, though, ideally, I will say don't do anything else. I will say focus on what you're doing.
Madam, 1 minute.
Keep your attention on the sensation that you're feeling. If possible, work with your breath at that time. Use that time, not for any other pursuit, especially any other sensory or some kind of a triggering pursuit. Try to keep the mind calm. You can take deep, slow breaths. You can focus on a japa. This can also be done. Whatever your sadhana is, you can do it at that time. Or you could visualize your Ishta Devata. These are ways of making the same mudra more powerful. But in these times, sometimes we have to negotiate. And naturally, there are people who say, I don't have time. Can I do this, sometime in the evening where I'm just sitting and watching TV? As a compromise, it's okay because the mudra will still have the effect. But ideally, when the mind is present, because that is yoga, right? So this is prana mudra. Prana mudra is considered extremely important for enhancing our vitality. We need this. And prana mudra is what improves our overall immunity, our disease resilience, so that we are not as susceptible. Energy is very important that anytime this can be done, you can try it out. When you feel a sag in your energy, you can try the prana mudra out for 20 minutes. You just try to stay still, keep the mudra, and you will feel a surge of that prana, the prana shakti, because the mudra is one that captures this and makes it available to us. Some people also report an improvement in vision, in sight, and natural, because your senses are also very acute. They function very well when the prana starts to flow well. So this is one mudra, very important from a day-to-day health perspective. The second is slightly more complex in terms of how you place it. It's called the apana mudra or the apana vayu mudra. So what you do is you bend the index finger and you place it at the base of the thumb, right? At the base of the thumb. And then the middle finger and the ring finger are held together. The middle finger and the ring finger touch the tip of the thumb and the little finger is left out. Am I clear? This is the mudra. You bend the index finger and then the thumb touches the ring and the middle fingers held together. The little finger is left free, again held this way. You don't hold it down. You hold it open on your lap, right? Now, the Apana Mudra is one that is considered to be very powerful, very potent. And what I have understood is that it is capable even of warding off an impending cardiac event. That is the potency of the mudra. This is the Apana Vayu Mudra. As I said, Apana, the function of the Apana Vayu is elimination. It has to throw out what your body does not need, which is toxic to the body. And we eliminate in the form of excreta, in the form of our urine, in the form of sweat, and various other excreta, even wax in the ear, mucus from the nose, the mucus in the eyes. All of these are forms of excretion that the body is constantly throwing out. This function is essential. When you look at Ayurveda, one of the most important aspects of diagnosis and treatment is mala shodhana, the pariksha of the mala, and the functions of the bowel and the bladder. These are essential. And if there is a block, if something impedes that, then it is likely to lead to multiple complications. And many of them, from the perspective of holistic healing, we understand that when there is a restriction of the Apana Vayu, it leads to cardiac dysfunction, weakness of the cardiac muscles, and then eventually things like angina pectoris, and then rapid heartbeat, palpitation, tachycardia, bradycardia, different kinds of cardiac issues can be moderated. Hypertension. These are many cardiac issues that can be very well regulated using the Apana Vayu Mudra. What it does is essentially enable better elimination, so that there are no blockages to the flow of prana. The reason I chose these two is because prana and apana are essential to life. That you need to bring in something that is nourishing you. Simultaneously, there has to be an output of what is not needed. The body has to void it. And so, because prana and apana are the basis of our life itself, I chose those from the perspective of physical, physiological health. Now, coming to emotional wellness, one major problem that I think that many of us face is anger. And anger comes because of situations that we feel are not in our control. Inevitably, anger is born of desire. The Bhagavad Gita tells us, Sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho vijayate krodat bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibramaha smriti bramshat buddhinasha buddhinasha pranashyati. In chapter 262-63 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna details this spiral. And he says that it starts from Sangha, Kama, from Kama, Krodha. And so that surge of anger happens when you want something, you don't get it, you make your effort, you get it, you lose it, or you don't get it, someone gets it. And then along with that anger, envy, greed, hatred, jealousy, everything will come very quickly. But then we don't know to express. We are now unable to express sometimes for various reasons, suppress, and then that adds up to our stress. There is a tapa, so much that I want, I'm not attaining it, or people are not behaving the way I want them to behave. It just builds up as anger, and then unfortunately makes us burst out in inappropriate ways. Now you have what we call the Mushti Mudra, which is basically making a fist. And very interesting. This is symbolic because the mushti is again a mudra that's used even in the Natya tradition as a show of strength, of confidence, of power. Generally, when you're angry, you say, I want to punch you. I mean, it's a common response. But here we are using that mudra to sublimate those tendencies of anger, of rage, of violence, aggressiveness. All of this we can work with using the mushti mudra. You just make a fist, and you close the fingers and you place the thumb on top of the ring finger. This is the Mushti Mudra. Again, all mudras to be held for at least 15 to 20 minutes. Generally, if you're doing multiple mudras, it is recommended that you give a gap of about 5 minutes between mudras, or you spread them through the day. That there are no adverse effects as such, but one has to know definitely what mudra you are using for which condition. The reason I say this is these are certain general mudras that can be done by everyone. This is also known as, can be used to develop feelings of joy, feelings of, delight in the world around us, a sense of evenness, balance. All these are outcomes of the Mushti Mudra. Now, why I say you should be careful is that, as I said, these are general mudras, but there are some that are very disease specific, like incontinence or other related menstrual issues or various other complaints for which one has to be cautious. For back pain, you need to know what you're pressing, where you're pressing. But these are general mudras, can be done by anyone. Now, coming to the last in the series that I planned for today is also, see, there is this idea in our tradition of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. It is important to live our dharma, our lives. We are here to fulfill a purpose. And in that process, naturally, artha and kama become essential to that. We have aspirations, we have desires to fulfill. We have people who are responsible for us, children, parents, elders, society. There is so much that one needs to do, for which you need to have a good physical wellness. Shariram, adhyam, kalu, dharma sadhanam. So for us to do whatever we need to do, your body needs to be a willing participant in that. So base wellness is needed. Emotional wellness is essential, because in the absence of emotional wellness, we become very unstable. We become very, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to handle. And then we see the increase in, psychological disorders, stress, anxiety, depression. All this is on the rise because of poor emotional control, regulation, and management. But what is even more important in our Sanatana tradition is moksha. Eventually, we also need to work on moving inwards, moving deeper. And there are a number of mudras that are known to increase the power of our sadhana. One such is the Chin Mudra, very well known. The Chin Mudra is placed with the thumb touching the tip of the index finger, placed down on your laps. And we see many of our murtis representing the Chin Mudra. You have the Buddha sporting the Chin Mudra. Patanjali is shown with the Chin Mudra. Many of our deities very often represented with the Chin Mudra. Why the Chin Mudra? Because this is a mudra that is believed to capture again that cosmic energy and to harness it so that the power of our sadhana multiplies. And it is a way also of stilling the mind and senses. See, when you're trying to do a japa or when you're meditating on something, constantly there are thoughts, other thoughts, what should I make for dinner? What do I do tomorrow? I have to go to the bank, this thought, that thought. Constantly there's something coming in. The use of the Chin Mudra itself is a way to regulate that so that the mind starts becoming focused and there is some measure of attention. Most importantly, there is a symbol behind it. The Chin Mudra itself represents the connection between the Paramatma and the Jivatma. Because that is our goal. We are moving towards that. The Jivatma is seeking its union with the Paramatma. And so the Paramatma represented by the thumb, the Jivatma is the index finger. And then you have the other three fingers that represent the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, which you have to transcend. Because these are the gunas that make up our universe. As Krishna says again in the Bhagavad Gita, Traigunyo Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunyo Bhava Arjuna. He says, all that we see in the material world is made up of the three gunas. Our bodies function because of that, but you have to transcend that for moksha. And so the three fingers that are outstretched represent this transcendence over Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Again, the Chin Mudra has to be placed on the floor and can be used in sadhana when you are chanting your whatever your daily prayers as part of your worship. If you have a japa practice, it can be done as you're doing the japa. And when you're meditating as well, it is a very good way of harnessing the mind and preventing that scattering of thought. So these are just a broad overview of some important mudras intended as an introductory orientation to mudras. Should I take questions, ma'am, or should I just move on? What do you... See, it's also a question of time. How many mudras can you do in one day is the question. It's a question of how much time we have. And so, see, when people are working from 9 to 5, you have to keep your hands engaged. Then I would say choose what is essential. So definitely the Prana Mudra, Apana Mudra. You have the Linga Mudra. That is a very powerful mudra for immunity, for building up the respiration function. Very useful in COVID as well. And so you can choose. Some mudras can be applied only when there is a need, but certain mudras can be used. So I would say choose maybe 2 that you do consistently, and the rest can be need-based. And then when you have a ritual of a worship or a puja, then maintain the chin mudra. Or if you're in a satsanga, you're listening to someone talk, then you can use that time. So these are ways of bringing it in. Both hands are okay. Linga mudra can be done with either on top, either finger. Okay, there is a request for a recap. The prana mudra is this, all right? The thumb placed touching the ring finger, the little finger, the other 2 fingers are extended. This is the prana mudra. The apana mudra is where you close the index finger, you place it at the base of the thumb. The next 2 fingers, the middle and ring finger, is bent, placed on the tip of the tongue. The little finger is left open. Right? And then you keep the hand down as you are sitting on line. This is the apana vayu mudra. The mushti mudra is just a fist. You make a fist, you place the thumb on the ring finger. That's where your thumb will reach. It can't go beyond. That's where you keep it. And the last is the chin mudra, this one, where you only press the thumb and the tip of the index finger together and you place it on your lap. These are the 4 mudras I have chosen for today's presentation. I think the 4 are enough as a base to begin with, and more or less as per need. Do we have time for me to look at the one piece of Gems of Shankara? Yes.
Ma'am, is it?
All right. So, no, there is no mention of mudra in the Yoga Sutra at all. No mention. But see, the thing is, the practice of mudra has always been a part of the Upasana tradition. And you have the various Anganyasa, Karanyasa, Vyapakanyasa, so many things that are a part of our ritual process, of our process of dhyana and japa, that when you develop practices, you can actually integrate them in yoga practices.
Is union with God the first mudra or the last mudra?
Pardon?
Is union with God the first mudra or the last mudra?
I would say it is both. Is union with God the first or the last mudra? I would say it's both. In fact, they say that there is this mudra that is supposed to draw you closer. Similarly, also the Namaskara mudra or the Anjali mudra, these are ways of connection. I would say front, center, end, everything is that. The purpose of everything else is to bring us to that. Are there any other questions from my live audience? Yes.
Is there any breathing technique to be followed by the
See, conventionally, they don't link. Are there any, I'm repeating the question for the sake of the online audience. Are there any breathing techniques to be followed? Conventionally, they don't mention it. But in my experience, when you can integrate certain techniques of breathing, specifically, I would say deep, long, smooth inhale, long, gentle exhale. Again, that you have to practice. It won't just come because most of the time we are not paying any attention to our breath. But the breath has to be dirgha and sukshma, long, smooth inhale in. You have to practice. So I would say work with deep breath in, open out the chest, allow the lungs to open up. Exhale, gently pull in the lower abdomen and relax. So this is what we call the deep breathing, or a diaphragm, thoracic, stomach, all coming together. When you engage the muscles, you will lead to a deep, smooth breath. If we are able to integrate the breath into the practice of the mudra, you will find its effects will multiply very obviously. Because the use of the breath is a remarkable way of both calming the mind and bringing it to attention. So the awareness will be much higher. But again, it's not mandatory. Many people say, oh, should I do this and that? Oh, it's too much. So little by little. But my recommendation personally would be that use the mudra, use that time for pranayama, for japa, for some kind of a dhyana if possible, because it will aggregate the effect. Are there any scriptures about this? See, my understanding is it comes through the tradition, through the Guru Parampara. Now there are people writing books about it. but I am not very sure about the literature. Because if you were to ask me about yoga, I'll tell you. But with regard to the mudra, you find the practice in various agamas. Maybe this is possibly a compilation. Possibly you see some of it borrowing from the tradition of marma also, and pressure points, because we have a very nuanced understanding of acupressure, pressure points. So it could be a synthesis of all of these that are coming together in the mudra tradition.
One person or one source to which all these mudras
There is, the question is that, is there no one source for all these mudras? In my understanding, know that they seem to have built up over time, synthesizing different traditions together. And there are a number of practitioners and they come from different backgrounds. Also, I would say there are certain conventional mudras, but then if you try to Google them, you'll find the same mudra known by different names. And some are actually Sanskrit names, but there are others that are given Tamil names. And it might be the same mudra and different parampara. So these are things that happen, but there are a certain general set of mudras that are accepted by all practitioners. Yes. Can you keep your hand on the lap as you do the mudras? Yes, you can. You can keep it if you're seated. If you're lying down, they can rest by the sides. But generally not down. You don't turn it down, you turn it up. It's okay. See, the thing is, seated on a mat, I would recommend in general, but many people are not even able to sit on the floor. Sitting on a chair is okay. But feet have to be, you have to have something below your feet so that your feet are not directly touching the ground. You can lie down on a bed, that's okay. And generally, you don't cross the feet. Or, you try to, when you're lying down, you keep your legs spread out. If you're seated, a comfortable Sukhasana is fine. And if you're seated on a chair, generally, I would say don't cross the leg, put one leg on top of the other, bend one knee. You keep the feet firmly on the floor, but there has to be something under the feet. It could be a mat or a little platform like a mana. That is okay. So that the feet are not directly touching the ground. Feet should not dangle also, because the dangling is not good from an ergonomic perspective. All right. No further questions? All right. So as the second part of this talk, I'll just spend about 10 minutes. I'm just going to present one piece, one verse from Shankara's Shivananda Lahari. Very beautiful composition, one that I have been very, very enamored by. Every verse of Shankara in every composition, I would say, is simply loaded with nuance. And so at Sarla ma'am's request, I'm just presenting just one verse. This is verse 20 of the Shivananda Lahari. Sada mohatavyam charati yuvatinam kuchagirau natatya shakhasu atati jatiti svairamabhitaha kapalin bhiksho me hridaya kapim atyanta chapalam dridham bhaktya badhva Shiva bhavadadhinam kuru vibho. This verse, although the Shivananda Lahari is addressed to literally that Ananda of Shivanubhava, here specifically in this verse, Shankara addresses the monkey nature of the mind. And he calls it, and he says, this mind of us, Hridaya Kapim Atyanta Chapalam. Atyanta Chapalam. It's not just an ordinary Chapalam. Chapalam is fickleness. It's constantly wavering. This is Atyanta Chapalam. What is that Atyanta? It is like a monkey. And what is this monkey? You see that, I think this is Swami Vivekananda also and several other masters who use this example. They said that this is not just an ordinary monkey. You imagine a monkey that is drunk. It is intoxicated. And it is filled with jealousy on seeing another monkey. And at the same time, it is stung on the tip of its tail by a scorpion. So we are speaking of a very, very agitated monkey, and this monkey is our mind. And he says, you take this mind of mine is impossible to control. It's just prancing about, it's jumping about from branch to branch like a monkey, and I'm not able to bring it to attention. Atati, jhatiti, svairam abhita. It's constantly in movement. I'm not able to control this mind. And therefore, he says, oh Shiva, you are the one. My mind is also dwelling all the time on the objects that draw my senses. You have these very beautiful Yuvatinam Kuchagirav. There are these beautiful maidens, and their form invokes a sense of longing, of desire in me, and my mind immediately flows towards that. I am a slave to the sense-driven mind. And so because of this, I'm not able to focus on you. This is what I should be doing, but I'm not doing this. And so very beautifully, here he's saying, Kapalin Bhiksho me. Give me this Bhiksha. You are the Kapalin. You are the one who's holding the skull in your hand. That itself, why is Shiva called the Kapali, or why does he wear the Kapala Mala, is because he's an epitome of Vairagya, of the highest level of Vairagya, because he's the Paramayogeshwara Adiyogi. And so he says, you are the one who embodies this principle of Vairagyam. And so give me this Bhiksha. Give me this Bhiksha of what? Dridam Bhaktya Badva Shiva Bhavadadhinam Kuru Vibho. Bind me by the power of Shiva Bhakti. So very beautiful these verses are, because here he is not telling us, bind me by Brahmajnanam. This is Shankara who's given us the very cream of Advaita Vedanta. But here he is not speaking about Brahmajnanam, because Brahmajnanam comes later. We have to start somewhere. We have to start here and now. And so he says, bind this mind of mine that is forever wandering, jumping about, prancing about, like this drunken monkey, intoxicated monkey. Tame this mind. Give me the Bhiksha of binding my mind with love, with the utmost love, bhakti, devotion to you. Because the nature of this mind is that, we see, it's very chanchalam. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, again, Arjuna asked this question, and he says, I'm unable to contain this mind, Krishna, chapter 6, 34, 35. This is the question where Arjuna says, I understand what you say. You're speaking about controlling the mind, regulating the senses. He says, Pramati Balavad Dridham. This is like a tempest. It's just, I'm not able to, how do I control this? Tasya Nigraham. How do I do this Nigraham? I don't understand. Vayor iva sudushchalam. He says, it is Vayor iva sunishchalam. Sorry. It's impossible to, I made a mistake with the reference, but it is like Vayu, the force of the wind is such that you can't hold it. You can't hold a tempest. My mind is like that. And so Krishna replies, and he says, Asamshayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam. It is Durnigraham. Accept this. This is the nature of your mind, but it can be regulated. How do you regulate it? Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. It is through abhyasa, through vairagya. You have to put an effort. And that effort must lead you to developing vairagya. In that manner, you can come to control. But here, what is that effort that is needed? What is that Diksha that Shankara is asking? He says, bind me with love for you. Let that be my sadhana. Let that be my abhyasa, so that bhakti overcomes this chapalatva of my mind. And so you see that this is a very beautiful, very powerful shloka, which speaks about the fact that all of us can aspire to attain that state of Shiva Bhakti, of Shiva Dhyanam. It is not limited only to the yogi, only to the jnani, only to the rishi, only to the mauni. Here and now it is possible for us with Bhakti. And so Bhakti becomes a starting point. When our hearts overflow with that Bhakti, then from Bhakti to Jnana, and from Jnana to Moksha eventually is possible. So you see that very beautiful synthesis here about the nature of the mind, how very fickle it is, and the power of Bhakti to overcome these, the pull, the temptation, and the limitations of the mind. So with that, I come to the end of this talk. This is just a brief sharing about this particular verse, one that I have found to be very beautiful. कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. Thank you. Namaskar.
Can I make a suggestion, please?
Certainly, sir.
Is it positive to have? It's not enough. Just